You'll just have to copy paste it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm good to go, guys.
All right, you're live, man.
Hey, that's
what's going on?
I messed up.
No worries. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the shop. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Dynasty Diagnostic podcast. My name is Eitan Mosier, and I'm joined, as always, by Sam Stompy Lane, who isn't at FF Stompy anymore. I mean,
nope.
Sam, what's your new handle here, so we can at least get that.
Fun story. So I changed it to Stompy the Bear, my original Twitter, because I felt like it might have been misrepresentative of that I'm only going to be a fantasy football account, especially over the last couple weeks. So I changed it then, and then I saw a video. Somebody shared a video of Candace Owens, who
wonderful person. That one is
one of the worst people imaginable. If nobody knows, she is a black conservative pundit for. I know she is published by
Shapiro.
Yes, basically Prager U. I'm pretty sure she hates her skin color. And I had one choice word for her that got me banned. I won't say it. I will say that listen, I understand that I get suspended. It was well worth it. But it's just funny the fact that our president can incite violence and say racist things on Twitter, and he doesn't get banned. He just gets that fake news sticker. So that's fun. So I will be back on that in 2 days, I believe this Thursday, sorry. But in the meantime, I'm at Sam Stompy. Because I just couldn't sit this everything that's going on out. I had to try and spread anything I could in terms of news. So I'll be back at Stompy the Bear, my original Twitter, here in a couple days. But fun story to start the day for us.
Yeah, of course. And before we get too deep into this, of course, I wanted to go ahead and introduce our guests that we also have with us today. As you know, we are always super blessed and super lucky to have some of the smartest minds in the fantasy community today. And I can verify this because I've been on the owner's manual. I know these guys know what the hell they're talking about. Chris Allen, Adam Wilde, this is going to go down. I've been trying to plan this for a while, guys. It took a quarantine. It took the world changing. It took a storm of all kinds of everything to finally have this get-together happen. But it's happened, and I'm happy to welcome you guys onto the show today.
I mean, how are we supposed to follow just the cavalcade of, just big name folks that y'all have had on this show? I mean, I don't even know what we're supposed to do with all this. I mean, y'all have had, folks like Mark Schofield on here. I don't even want to get into the fact that you guys had Matthew Berry on this show, and then you come and talk to us. I don't even know what to do with us. Yeah, Sam, we just had a wonderful conversation yesterday. Love and appreciate you, brother. Eitan, it's been a while, but the things that you guys are doing out here, like with this show and with your work, it's awesome to get the group back together and for us to all have a conversation. So I appreciate y'all for taking the time.
I thought you were going to say, I don't know how we're going to follow up Sam's fight for social justice, because I don't know how we're going to.
I already know I can't do that
either. Man, we could go into that for hours. Hell yeah, Sam.
I really wish that I could use other words that won't get me suspended.
I get it, right? No.
And here's the thing is, I'm white, and I am just full of rage at this point. So I can't imagine what it's like for for any African American seeing this shit just to go, it's normal. I don't know. I've seen that has been the reaction that when I've asked black people is, how are you taking this? And they're like, it's pretty normal. So I was just like, Jesus Christ. I'm angry, and I'm just,
It's literally every day. Honestly, the kind of the take that I have on all of it is I just hope that this doesn't become another hashtag, because that seems to kind of be what these things turn into over time. They blow up. There's a lot of eyes on it. There's a lot of ears on it for a period of time, and then the news cycles a few times, and within a few weeks, we're not talking about everything that happened here and everything that people were trying to fight for at this moment, and it just becomes a reference point. It becomes something that maybe we'll have a minor blip on some history book somewhere, and I just don't want that to be the case, because this is something that seems to be cycling. It just kind of like the stock market almost. It happens over and over and over again, and people get desensitized to it. So I hope that's not what's going on here, and I hope that some real progress is going to be made as a result of some of the things that are going on. But yeah, it's been just a tremendous amount of things that have led up to this. I wasn't even really having a plan to talk about this, but screw it. It's my podcast. We're going to talk about it. So,
you tell them.
I'm kind of at the level where I feel like there were a lot of things that led up to this. I was having a conversation with my girlfriend the other day, who was essentially like, well, I mean, imagine what's been going on year over year over year, and then couple that with, oh, but now you have no job, and now you also can't feed your family, and now you also have everything else piled on top of that. And then you get another one of these really, really insightful events happen. I mean, if there is like a reaction point, or a point where everything gets so pressurized that it's going to explode, I mean, this is the perfect storm version of that. And it's kind of been eye-opening to just see everything happen nationwide, and see, so much of the positive through social media that's allowing people to connect from city to city, but also so much of the backlash. There's a lot going on right now that I hope people are truly paying attention to and truly internalizing for more than however long this hashtag takes.
Man, a lot of people have tweeted things like, this is my job now. Like, my voice is my job now because we're at home. What are we doing? Like, I'm working from home, but I can't get off Twitter. I feel like I'm stuck to it because I'm just sharing, and people need to see this, especially with a media that refuses to cover it properly. I don't need to know your sentiment. I just want to know what's happening. So it's so tough right now. And it's like, yeah, if we're going to have a movement, right now's the time. Everyone's home anyways. We can't let Coney 2012 happen again. We can't have that effect happen again, where we make a lot of t-shirts. We speak out quite a bit, and then what happened? Like, it can't fizzle out like that. That's
well, a guy ended up jerking off on the street corner. So
fair.
That would, so, I just remember that dude lost his goddamn mind.
Yeah,
we got somewhere.
But yeah, I mean, I agree. I do agree though, and Chris and I had mentioned, Chris had mentioned that we talked yesterday on a new podcast I'm doing, but it feels different. Of course, I can't say one way or another. I mean, to me, this just feels different than Eric Garner and Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin, because I don't think those lasted this long or had this much intensity for this long at the very least. And Minneapolis the city council is at least promised to vote to defund or dissolve the police department as we know it and invest more in mental health and qualifiers and testing and stuff like that. And I hope this continues. I mean, New York did a good thing. They repealed 50A, which is basically police secrecy law. Mm-hmm. So it seems like things are getting done, and it's always funny, or it's not always funny. It was funny this time where you see these people protesting against your protests, and they ask, what is all of this doing? And I was like, like the Civil Rights Act was signed into law after I believe it was 8 days of rioting in Harlem. And sure enough, like 6 or 7 days of protests and riots and Minneapolis decides to dissolve its police department. So it's doing something. And it feels like it's actually doing something this time. Well, of course, we'll see what happens over the next month if we keep this up. But
Right.
with COVID and people not, like Eitan said, not having jobs,
We got
I think
time.
the intent, I mean, while this is like one of the worst situations possible, it seems like there might be a silver lining in that it happened at the time it did, so we can get real change.
Right. And it's go ahead, Eitan.
I was just gonna say, I'm hopeful because of the increase in, again, what social media has allowed us to do, which is make everything more transparent, regardless of what the organizations that are kind of propagating this want it to be seen or not. Everybody has a cell phone in a corner. Everything is
Exactly.
seen. Everything, the information is transferred from coast to coast in no time. And I think as long as that becomes more and more integrated into our society, then, I mean, even if things don't necessarily change as quickly as we would like them to, then at least there's going to be eyes on it in a way that has never happened before. And that in itself, over time, it is going to cause some people to act differently.
We're seeing a lot of reporting that it's almost bringing back the reputable reporters through social media that we haven't seen in years. Just completely outside of this movement, just media has become on both sides entertainment. And if you didn't know that already, you weren't watching. So it's interesting to see the side effects of the movement that we have happening right now. And another thing I just wanted to mention before we get into fantasy football is like, man, we're just asking for everyone to be treated the same. Like, these people are acting like they act when you quote unquote try to take the guns, or they're acting like they're being personally attacked. And people of color are asking to just be treated the same. And let me break it to you, not everyone's even treated well in this country. So people of color aren't even asking to be treated well. They're just asking to be treated the same. So if you get angry at that, look in the mirror. That's all I want to say. I finally got to get a voice out there about this. I've only been doing the DLF mailbag, and we try to squeeze a little bit in there, like me yielding my time there at the end. But I'm happy that we were able to have this conversation, so I could say like the video that went viral today. Just be happy that people of color are asking for equality and not revenge. That's all I have to say.
All right, so let's move on to a much less important side of things, much less important news, but interesting all of the same. Let's move on to some fantasy football. And the big news in the football world right now, as my phone goes off incessantly.
Jesus Christ! What are you doing?
The big news in football right now is the fact that we are having two more potential holdouts at the RB position in the 2020 season. And I don't think it's going to stop at two. I think that we have more to talk about on that in just a moment here. But, I mean, let's talk about the news of the ones that are out right now, which is Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook. Both of these guys, new CBA signs, so definitely some things have changed that are going to be a part of that. But, I mean, what are your thoughts on how fantasy owners should be really approaching the situations in both Cincinnati and in Minnesota with both of these backs on both of these teams? We'll start with you, Chris, and then we'll go ahead and we'll switch it over to Adam, and then we'll get Snobby on it.
Okay, so I'm thinking at least with the Minnesota situation, it looks like at least from both a production and also even a draft capital perspective, like Dalvin Cook doesn't have a ton of leverage like on the team in order to force what he was originally asking for. If I'm remembering correctly, the news stories were putting out that he was looking for something in the $15, $16, $17 million annual. And to me, that just doesn't seem feasible. I'm just like looking at his production, looking at the injuries that he sustained over the last couple of years. It's hard for me to see how he could actually wind up falling into like that sort of contract situation. But the Minnesota Vikings, from what I understand, they came back with an offer somewhere in like maybe half of that, $6, $7, $8 million annually. So Do I think that he's worth that? No, I think there's probably some middle ground that they could probably cover. If me personally, without, I'm not a contractologist or whatever you want to call it. My understanding into the negotiations portions of it is limited, but I think somewhere in the 10 to 12 million range, I think it is reasonable given the way the team is structured and where they're headed. But with them also drafting Alexander Mattison like right behind him, again, doesn't have a ton of leverage. Joe Mixon, I think, finds himself in a different situation because I don't believe, at least me personally, I don't think that guys like Travion and Gio, or any of the backups behind him have the capability to pick up what Mixon can. Gio is fairly talented, don't get me wrong, and he has proven in spot starts to be able to carry the load when Joe Mixon has been out on injury. But to sustain a full season workload, that what we would expect, I don't think the range of outcomes support that as it would with somebody like Madison. So at least in both of those situations, do I think that they wind up getting paid? Yes, I do think both the teams wind up coming to some sort of agreement before the season gets started. But do I think that they wind up getting what they're asking for? No, I think both will probably wind up having to back down in order to get to at least something that's reasonable for both of them.
Yeah, I'm looking here at both of what Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon are due, and man, I really hope from an economical perspective that this new CBA helps with this, because this is just absolutely miserable from two productive young running backs, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't feel like the running back position is too terribly important. I think that we would get fantastic seasons out of Giovanni Bernard and fantastic seasons out of Alexander Mattison or Mike Boone if they had to start all 16 games. So I'm not even saying that the position is too terribly relevant, but for Mixon to be up for 1.7 mil and Dalvin Cook to be up for $2 million, that just doesn't seem fair, frankly. So I don't disagree with their holdout. I will say about the Dalvin Cook numbers, I've been paying very, very close attention to those sources because there's just 0% chance that is a reputable source that's saying that he is asking for north of Christian McCaffrey's contract. For one, Christian McCaffrey is up there with any wide receiver for receptions in his first 3 seasons. Actually, I think I saw today that he had close to, if not the most receptions in his first 3 seasons when compared neck and neck with the wide receivers. So Christian McCaffrey got paid as a wide receiver and a running back. And if anyone deserved that contract, he did. Not to say that it was necessarily smart for the Panthers. There's no way that Dalvin Cook is asking for that amount of money. And I looked at that report and I can't find a real source to that. So I don't know that 16 mil is what he's asking for. I'm not sure his number. It's probably too much. I guess every player has the right to start too high and work their way down. But I do think that report is crushing his ADP right now. Scott Fishbowl right around the corner. He's going to get drafted really late. I just say be wary of reports. Not every report is completely factual. And if he is asking for 16 million, well, don't plan to see Dalvin Cook this year. That's just not going to happen. But with Mixon, I think that somebody earlier, I wish I remembered who tweeted this, but it was a good job by them. Lots of continuity with the new quarterback. You want to keep that offense together, especially since that offense can be extremely explosive. You get AJ Green back. Auden Tate did very well last year. Drafted T. Higgins. John Ross has shown a little bit of flashes. And you've got Tyler Boyd, the figure of consistency. What better could you do for your rookie quarterback than to also keep a very productive young running back with them? So I think Mixon's probably asking for something more reasonable, especially since he hasn't necessarily got to see a peak season since the line's been kind of messed up, bad offense at times. Andy Dalton was bad at times. He hasn't had like the blow up periods that Dalvin Cook has had. So I think Joe Mixon probably is pretty close to a done deal, in my opinion.
So you mentioned the CBA. It actually hurts Dalvin Cook more because it basically says that if you hold out in the final year of your rookie contract, you are a restricted free agent for Minnesota.
Right.
Mixon, I believe, is in year 4? No, is he in year 4 too?
Yeah,
They were both drafted in the same year. So
Yep.
the issue is the accrued season. That's the whole thing that we were talking about with Melvin Gordon.
I mean,
last year.
so and Dalvin Cook has missed enough time that does that count against his accrued season?
No,
I'm not sure
no,
if injury time.
But anyway, they both face restricted free agency if they continue to hold out. Right. Dalvin Cook, like you said, his number is too big. I read 13 million, which is still too high.
Still
fine, you can give me 10 million a year, but I mean, time and time again, Raheem Mostert, Davian Williams,
CJ Anderson,
and any of these guys. Philip Lindsay. I mean, nobody's going to pay.
Don't make me bring up Mike Anderson and Landis Gary.
Yeah, I mean, Terrell Davis was a 6th rounder. We'll start naming great. Ruben Drum.
Yeah, D'Angelo Williams.
There you go. But yeah, I mean, the point is that running backs are replaceable. You want the elite running back, sure, in fantasy, but in terms of the real NFL, they're extremely replaceable. And so nobody's really going to pay you all that much. And I think holding out has actually ended up hurting Lev Bell and Melvin Gordon more. So it would be wiser, I believe, to sign a contract that's going to get you paid over the next few years. And really, I'm going to it's hard to say these things coming from a perspective that we're relatively poor compared to these people.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, let's say he gets 3 years, $9 million for an extension. Like, I don't know how you don't sign that in the wake of Melvin Gordon, in the wake of Le'Veon Bell, and especially with the restricted free agency looming if you don't play.
I think the one thing that's interesting here is, I mean, on one side of the coin, when you look at the Minnesota Vikings, they threw the second fewest passes in the league last season. Second fewest pass attempts in the league last season. Second or third. Somebody can go ahead and cite me on that, but something in that range. So a lot of people are saying that this is a team that is entirely built around the run and that must feature Dalvin Cook to be able to have that edge and that type of differentiation in their game. But I'm not necessarily sure if you kind of look a little bit closer that that's the case, because the team is set up to pass. If you're just talking about targets, okay, well, I mean, you have Kirk Cousins, who's a decent quarterback. Adam Thielen, if he's healthy this year, he is going to be well within the shout of being a top 5 wide receiver, just based on volume alone. They obviously bought Justin Jefferson as a cheap replacement for Stephon Diggs. I don't think you're going to get the same number. You're going to get the same production immediately from that swap, but that's still a valid option for you. Kyle Rudolph was a little bit underutilized last year. Obviously, they have another TE and Irv Smith in that offense that you would expect to take a little bit of a jump in target. So if Mike Zimmer is willing to kind of back down or back away from his ideals and his principles just that little bit, then yeah, I definitely get what you guys are talking about with Dalvin Cook doesn't really have a leg to stand on here. It's kind of the Ezekiel Elliott type situation with, well, this is how the offense is built, but Ezekiel Elliott didn't have what, Chris, you were saying, the health that, or Dalvin Cook didn't have the health that Ezekiel Elliott has had throughout his career. So I'm not even sure he can kind of cite that. And when you look at Joe Mixon, Stompy, you and I talk about this constantly. I mean, when you have a rookie quarterback on a team, that frees up so much excess cap space on that roster to be able to go and do stupid shit like the Carolina Panthers did with Christian McCaffrey. Yes. Having a cheap quarterback allows you to do nonsense and get away with it at the running back position. So, yeah, maybe he doesn't get the $13, $14 million contract that CMC got, but I do think that there's enough wiggle room in that they're going to want to keep the band together there. I mean, that said, Mike Zimmer has fired offensive coordinators in the past for not being as run-focused as he wanted them to be. And if you truly believe that Dalvin Cook is the difference between winning and losing, if you're going to be that run-focused team that you want to be, then you kind of have to battle some inner demons when it comes to figuring out what's an acceptable number for these guys. But the way the current CBA is set up, the way the new CBA is set up, essentially says, like Stompy was saying, that if you are holding out in your rookie contract, do not accrue that extra season that allows you to then hit free agency after that. So, yeah, your hands are kind of tied behind your back if you're a running back looking for a new deal. I would just hope that I think that one thing that maybe is missing from this conversation is I think that this rookie class, this rookie crop of running backs is going to either mean the extended careers of quite a few guys that maybe we haven't seen or that maybe we didn't expect to see for very long, or is going to be the death of a lot of guys. If this rookie running back group comes in and takes over positions, if JT completely destroys Mac, if CEH completely takes over everything that Damian Williams has done in that backfield, then, I mean, teams are even more disincentivized to go ahead and spend big money on these backs, because you can just keep doing it year after year, even with the relatively few backs in the next class that we're thinking about right now that are going to come in and be able to take those jobs. But yeah, I mean, it's just a situation where it's an economic problem. It's supply and demand at the running back position. A lot of people that play football that are athletic enough are able to perform that job adequately, and that makes it less valuable when compared to the other positions. You can't teach a guy to be 6'5", 350 pounds and play left tackle. Like, that's something that only happens in a few humans on this earth. A guy that has a body size, a guy that has quickness to play running back, not that it doesn't matter, not that it's not significant on the football field. It's just that there are so many other guys who might not even be able to get you that level of production, but can get you close enough to put you in the same type of offensive situations that you would have been in otherwise. So it's going to be dangerous times for running backs moving forward. And that was the segue to talking about more running backs that are going to be facing a lot of these same situations very soon. Aaron Jones is a guy people don't often bring up when it comes to contract situations. He's going to have a conversation with the Green Bay Packers pretty soon with A.J. Dillon in his backfield, in the same way that Alexander Madison is in Minnesota. And then if you go over to the Saints, I mean, if there's one guy that I think can be paid like CMC because of his worth as a wide receiver, it would probably be Alvin Kamara. That said, I think it's a whole new world in the Saints universe, because for the first time in what I think is forever, they actually have a legitimate wide receiver 2 on that team this year in Emmanuel Sanders. They've never really had that before. Alvin Kamara has been the wide receiver 2 essentially outside of Michael Thomas on that roster for the longest time. So, I mean, what does this mean for the future of those guys moving forward? And are you starting to get nervous looking at those guys from a dynasty perspective?
I'm not. I guess it's hard for me for this particular season to get excited about some of the wide receiver 2s, like the incoming receivers, like any of the free agents that are switching teams, just due to COVID. I'm just thinking about it realistically. I mean, with this shortened off season and the fact that for a lot of those guys, they won't really be able to like get on the field as much and be able to practice and get in sync with their quarterback in a position that requires that much nuance and that much timing. It's hard for me to buy in like in year one, like with them. And is that something that they'd be able to, unless they just instantly click, and it's something that they have one of those like mind meld like type of moments. For me, it's more of I need more. I need to be able to wait and see how they're going to wind up connecting. And for the Saints, it's even more problematic, because is this going to be Drew Brees last year? I don't know. So for a lot of those, for especially for the Saints situation, it's just, can they catch fire in the short window that they have with one of the better quarterbacks in the league? And the wide receiver 2 position, like in New Orleans, is probably something that we've been chasing for the better part of a decade. I mean, we expected to be that when they set Teddy Ginn down there. That didn't happen. We expected Traquan Smith to be that next guy, and that didn't really pan out. So then it's been like these slew of just like random guys that have kind of popped off ever since they got rid of quite a few like decent wide receivers over the past couple of seasons. So even though Emmanuel Sanders is now a part of that offense, I still have some questions, especially for this upcoming season, where again, we're going to have that shortened off season. They need production now. And if Drew Brees in his, in the twilight of his career is expecting perfection. He's expecting production. He's expecting to be able to connect with receivers right off the bat. Could we see Emmanuel Sanders essentially become the third, fourth option in that offense behind Thomas, Kamara, and Cook? It's possible for me to see that, where a guy like Emmanuel Sanders doesn't really have as much value like in his first season, just because of the already established pieces that are established good pieces that are a part of that offense. That's my primary concern.
Yep. And what I wanted to mention about these rookie running backs, kind of like the situation that we have with Dillon and Jones. If you look at the big five running backs that we have coming out this year, only one of them is in front of, quote unquote, an actually paid running back. It's weird to think about. Mark Ingram is the only running back that may get supplanted this year that is actually being paid. We have Kerryon Johnson, Damian Williams, Marlon Mack, Darrell Henderson. So, and Aaron Jones is not being paid. I think the NFL might be getting smart. I think we've scrutinized them enough that they might be getting smart, and it's going to get really, really hard for Dynasty if that is the case. We're going to kind of kick ourselves for scrutinizing them so much actually here soon, because they're realizing that, yes, I would like to have a good running back, but I'm not going to stick with these guys. I'm not going to stick with Kerryon Johnson. I'm not going to stick with a Damian Williams. We can recycle. Just keep on going. And none of these backfields, sans the CMC, are really sticking with one workhorse, right? The workhorse is just about dead, in my opinion. So that takes us over to Alvin Kamara. He's never been in the primary role, but he might be just valuable enough as a receiver, as I said earlier with Christian McCaffrey. Maybe I am on board with paying him. They're going to have a cheap quarterback either way next year. Hopefully it's not Taysom Hill. Please don't be Taysom Hill. But if it's Jameis Winston again, no way he gets paid after a year of backing up. And he's already taken a discount to be with the Saints one time. Say he learns from Drew Brees. Drew Brees has his send-off season. Maybe they get a Super Bowl. Jameis is staying. He's going to stay for a decent contract there. So either way, quarterback position is going to be cheap for them. Kamara may be one more exception, in my opinion, to paying that running back position. Aaron Jones, unfortunately, he's done very well with his opportunities. He's not had enough of a market share of that backfield for me to believe that it warrants getting paid. Unfortunately, we said on our mailback show for DLF that we don't know, because the Green Bay front office is just so off the wall. But if I have to take them at face value, they don't pay Aaron Jones. They brought in A.J. Dillon. They want him to be Brandon Jacobs. That's fine. Aaron Jones has never had over 60% of the touches in that backfield. So I think Aaron Jones walks. I think Alvin Kamara might warrant getting that contract.
Well, I think that, it all ends with the fact that, like Eitan said, Kamara can catch. Kamara is one of the best pass catchers out of the backfield. It gives teams a bevy of options with a guy who can catch. With a guy who is good at running the ball and then will run out of the backfield in actual routes, not just these dump down flat routes. So yeah, I think I agree with that. I think Kamara deserves it. And he is. If they even do actually get a rookie next year, you're gonna want somebody like two very sure-handed guys if you don't want to go into a rebuild. So you're gonna want somebody like Kamara and Michael Thomas. And like Adam said, if Jameis Winston is there, you already have basically opened that window a little bit more. Maybe. Depends on how you can harness Jameis, or how Sean Payton would be able to harness Jameis Winston. But in that sense, you would still also want Kamara there. There's just not a lot. Like we say running back is replaceable, and it is on the ground, absolutely. But when you have a guy like CMC or Alvin Kamara or David Johnson in his heyday, those are worth gold, because they can do everything on the football field that you ask of them, and they're extremely valuable and helpful to a Super Bowl run.
Is there no thought, you guys, of any sort of comparison between Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara, given what Aaron Jones was able to do in the receiving game last year? Sans Devontae Adams for as long as that team kind of rolled with him injured. Do you think that maybe can cause Green Bay to sort of look at Jones and Dillon and Williams as completely different weapons, maybe equate Williams and Dillon and still have a receiving role available for Jones, given their lack of investment in the wide receiver room on draft day?
No. He's not near the pass catcher that Kamara, CMC, David Johnson is. He's fine. He's a good pass catcher. He's just not near the best in the league. And they just drafted A.J. Dillon. They're not going to pay Aaron Jones the money that he's going to want in free agency.
Yeah, a tough thing that I've seen over the years with fantasy owners, and myself included, we have to remember how many touchdowns Aaron Jones had. And we have to understand that next year it might be 5. So when we go from 16 touchdowns to 5, that's a big deal. Eitan, you're bringing up a good – I think Aaron Jones is a fine pass catcher, but I've been on record saying that Christian McCaffrey is a top 5 route runner. And the people that want to get mad at that, go do the work. I realize it sounds dumb, but I believe he is a top 5 route runner. Alvin Kamara is probably up there in the 25 or 30. I haven't put the work behind him because I haven't made that claim. But Sam hit it on the head. I mean, it's not even the running back position to me. It's something different. It does something different to defenses. Defenses have to play a different way. You have to always have a package on the field that can mirror that. You never get to have those jumbo packages. I don't know that Aaron Jones really does that. I think he's fine. I like him as a running back, but I don't think he warrants another contract, especially since A.J. Dillon really didn't get the chance to catch in college too much. That offense just doesn't really allow it. So we don't really know that he can't catch anyways. Hopefully he can.
AJ Brown, Hayden Hurst. Oh, sorry. I thought you answered the question.
No, I guess the differences between Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara, I guess I'm wondering if they're that stark that at least from a tactical advantage, like do they offer those same benefits like on the field? And I think that's true. I think that how they both as runners and as pass catchers, I think they offer a similar advantage to teams. But I think that's the problem. It's how the individual teams value them. And I think with Green Bay, obviously they don't value him as much. But if he were to go to a different system, like let's say, I mean, God forbid, knock on wood, this is not what I'm advocating for at all. But let's say if Kenyon Drake or Austin Eckler don't make it through the season and they need somebody like that, those are offensive systems that would value somebody like Aaron Jones. I think that our problem as dynasty managers as an enthusiast is that like we see the talent and the production, but when it comes to the organization and all that, it's just there's a whole other level that goes into the talent evaluation portion. Whereas we can see the fits, we can see the schematic advantage that somebody like Jones would provide in the field because he's agile, because he's quick, he has that burst, he has soft hands, he can run a good route out of the backfield. So he offers that advantage on the field. But with Green Bay, the way that they're trying to structure their offense, to me, it looks like they're trying to do more of what LaFleur was doing in Tennessee than what Green Bay has been trying to do historically, of being a more pass-first offense with Aaron Rodgers. But they don't want a guy like Aaron Jones. They want somebody more like Derrick Henry instead to lead their offense, hence A.J. Dillon. It's just that's where it's not really from it's not more from a I guess from a league perspective. It's more from that team specifically and what they're trying to do and how they see how they can win on the field. And that's where Aaron Jones just winds up getting dinged.
Something to kind of keep in the back of your mind is wide receivers changing teams, like you mentioned earlier with the whole Emmanuel Sanders thing, Chris. Yeah, that generally seems to see a downturn, at least in that first season. But running backs changing teams don't necessarily always have that same type of downgrade. So I wouldn't say that these guys are dead on account of them not being highly valued by their current team, like you were saying. this season was unique in a way in terms of just the sheer number of quality backs coming out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Next year isn't this year. Next year is not the same quantity of guys that are going to be very much a part of their offenses immediately. So we could potentially see a slightly larger free agent market for running backs next year rather than the market that we saw this year because of the lack of big name products in the running back class of the 2021 season. So, I mean, it might be a situation where, yeah, you're not happy because Aaron Jones scored 19 touchdowns on Green Bay and you don't know if he's going to ever get that role somewhere else, but there might be a place for him going into the following season, regardless of what happens with Green Bay. And I think the same can be said of a lot of backs that you might be worried about heavily right now.
Yeah, but one thing I wanted to mention is we want Aaron Jones to stay in Green Bay, and I forgot to mention that. Like, if you have Aaron Jones, you want him to stay in Green Bay. But what I forgot to mention is that Aaron Jones historically is very undersized. He's 207 pounds, 5'9". Jamal Williams don't have his height, 201 pounds. I'm not talking about a small jump. Like, A.J. Dillon's one of the biggest back, if not the biggest back in the league right now at 247 pounds. So if that doesn't send a clear message and direction change, I highly doubt that they saw A.J. Dillon for his actual athleticism and his play on the field and said, I need to have him in the second round. What I more so think they saw is that he is massive, and that's what they want to start doing with their offense. So to me, that's a little bit of an indicator there that we're not going to see Aaron Jones where we want him to stay. And you're absolutely right, Eitan. We could see him go somewhere fantastic, but if you pay for him, you want to know where he's going to be. If you have him, you probably hold and just hope he goes somewhere you want him to be.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let's look at some of the other interesting things going on around the league. I mentioned Hayden Hurst. I dropped his name just a little bit. Apparently, Matt Ryan has some kind words for Hayden Hurst, said he was one of the most athletic tight ends that he's played with. This is after the huge season from Austin Hooper. Obviously, people have big dreams for Calvin Ridley. I mean, let's talk about Hayden Hurst first, and let's go on to some of the narratives going around Dynasty Twitter right now and figure out which one of these we think is our bust. But before we get into that, again, let's talk about Hayden Hurst. Is he the tremendous value that everybody says he is? Is he on the level of a Tyler Higbee, of a Blake Jarwin, I guess, pre-CeeDee Lamb? Is he the same type of dude that you're just as excited about?
Go ahead, Adam.
I think you can be excited as his ADP. I'm not going to hurt anybody's feelings at his low ADP. He's definitely a target that people should have. Okay, so here's a good example that came right to my head. The pillow that was Kyle Rudolph didn't pan out. So these QBs do like to talk about their new additions a lot. I don't take that. I take it at face value is what I'm trying to say, that you want to hype up your new acquisition. So I hear it. Hayden Hurst, I don't know that he's the most athletic tight end he's ever played. Didn't he throw passes to Tony Gonzalez?
I think you forgot about that.
I mean, he was like in his mid-30s.
I don't care. I do not care.
I mean, Hayden Hurst is athletic in that he played two sports, yeah, but the other one was baseball. So I don't necessarily know he's the most athletic. I think at his low ADP, we want pass catchers for the Falcons for sure, and he's the cheapest of them, unless you want to count Laquan Treadwell. But I often joke that the 11 first-round players is going to get ruined when Russell Gage beats out Laquan Treadwell. But I do like it. I'm not going to pay extra for him because Matt Ryan said that, because that is what a quarterback, especially a smart one like Matt Ryan, does to their new acquisitions. He's probably said similar about Laquan Treadwell. Maybe we just didn't hear it. My problem with Hayden Hurst in Dynasty, it's hard because the career arc for a tight end is a little different later. But when you come into the league at 25, if you don't know the story, it's pretty interesting. He made it to the big leagues. He got yips, which is something crazy to read about and super unfortunate for him. Comes back 1 year of school, didn't really do too terribly well at school, and then comes into the NFL, right? I think that if you want to take this approach with any team, this is my advice, any team in the NFL that you think is a quality offense, if you buy the cheapest player on that offense, there is a good chance that you will quote unquote win. That's really my takeaway here. Not too much just about Hayden Hurst. I just think it's a good little tidbit. If you want to invest in good offenses, you can't really buy Calvin Ridley right now. You don't want to pay for Julio if he's 31.
Adam, are you advocating for Jordan Howard right now? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
I mean, yeah. Honestly, well, actually, no. I'm advocating for Matt Breida, but
Wow.
Okay.
Hey, if Jordan Howard gets cheaper than Matt Breida, sure, go for Jordan Howard. But right now, Matt Breida's a few rounds less than him, and I think Matt Breida's a hell of a back. So, yes, I am.
I think going back to Hayden Hurst, I think now like he's become like the popular tight end to the point where his ADP is going to continually get pushed up to the point where he becomes not a value anymore. But I'm hesitant to go ahead and just crown him as like do I believe the hype? I don't know. I guess I'm kind of slow on the uptake, or like slow to catch on to the hype train, like as for most things anyway. But I think I understand the logic behind it. I mean, Atlanta had one of the highest neutral passing rates in the league this past season. Matt Ryan, his short and intermediate passing was, I think, like around like 55% this past year. So with the removal of guys like Mohamed Sanu, I mean, Russell Gage, Laquan Treadwell, and some of those other like ancillary players are still around. But I mean, so if Hayden Hurst walks into a favorable situation, then sure, I get it. But to try and go ahead and assign the myth of vacated targets, right, that Peter Howard like rages against all of Twitter for most of the time, that's where I start to pump the brakes, because we try and fit what tight ends have done in the past to their replacements, and I don't necessarily think that that's possible or that's necessary. Like, could he still have a good season? Could he still wind up with 80 to 90 targets? Yes, that is absolutely within his range of outcomes. But is there a possibility that Calvin Ridley now breaks out, because Calvin Ridley has really only had within less than 100 targets for most of his career so far.
He was the wide receiver 3 pretty much his entire time in Atlanta until Mohamed Sanu was traded.
Exactly. So now if we expect Calvin Ridley to take a step forward, could now Calvin Ridley now hop into a 110 to 120 target season? And then now Hayden Hurst now takes a step back, and instead of 80 to 90 targets, we're looking at 60 to 70 targets. Is that possible? I think that's within the range of outcomes. So it's just understanding that team as a whole, how that team wants to operate, and trying to fit this tight end that's moving teams in this season with the shortened offseason. I think all of those things have to come into play. And that's where it's just, do I like the situation? Absolutely. But is it something that I'm expecting to hit in year one, like this upcoming season? I'm really hesitant to buy in on that.
What about you, Sam? Is it Austin Hooper, or is it the Austin Hooper role?
It's the Austin Hooper role. But the thing is, like you said, Calvin Ridley's kind of been the pass catcher 3 most of his time in Atlanta. Yeah. And so we just haven't seen the full Calvin Ridley, but he's had 2 back-to-back breakout seasons to be realistic. So I don't know how, especially with Matt Ryan, how Calvin Ridley doesn't step up into that pass catcher 2 role, that target 2 role. Not to mention that Todd Gurley is also there. He's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. Now, I actually don't mind Hayden Hurst, but it's because the way I build my teams, I punt tight end, because especially in not tight end premium leagues and not 2 tight end leagues, not Scott Fishbowl apparently. there's not a gigantic difference from tight end 1 to tight end 15, 16, 17, where you're getting like a huge difference between RB1, RB24, and we see gigantic cliff after probably the third round or in the middle of the third round when it comes to running backs. So I'm okay with having Hayden Hurst as my tight end 1 because he is going to be the starting tight end there. I just don't really care if I get that many points because usually I'm going to make it up with my top end running backs or my value wide receivers. So for me, I'm fine with getting Hayden Hurst, but yeah, I would not buy the hype. He is athletic. He's a good tight end, but Mark Andrews beat him out. Mark Andrews was his 3rd round pick. Hayden Hurst was a 1st round pick.
Yeah, let me just throw the target. Sorry, Sam, go.
No, you're good. No, you're good.
I just wanted to throw the targets in there so people had a little more context. So Hayden Hurst only received 23 in his rookie season. Sure, fine. But the problem is Mark Andrews performed in his first season. Second season, Hayden Hurst only had 39. But look at the last 3 seasons for Austin Hooper, 97, 88, 65. To me, that's telling that he earned them. So it might be Austin Hooper just as a counter to maybe it was the Austin Hooper role. To me, it seems like it might be Austin Hooper just because it grew every single year. And besides Calvin Ridley and despite Calvin Ridley still expanded. And if anybody deserves an expanded role, it is Calvin Ridley, who had 92 targets in year 1, 93 targets in year 2, 64 receptions year 1, 63 in year 2, and 821 in year 1, 866 in year 2. What else can he do with those targets than to earn more targets? So to me, I see when I look at those 3 players, I see Austin Hooper expanded his role each year by progressing as a player. And then I see Calvin Ridley has done nothing but earn more opportunity. So now looking at that, it may be a little bit of a letdown if the ADP elevates. If it stays low, like I said, buy yourself out Hayden Hurst, cheapest in a good offense. If it goes up, I'm not buying him over someone like, let's say, Gesicki.
Mm-hmm.
Same question to all 3 of you. We'll go ahead and we'll start with Adam. Hayden Hurst, Mike Gesicki, Austin Hooper, or does it matter at all?
Mike Gesicki, not close to me.
Really, I think Gesicki as well, but I think it's pretty close. Just if you follow the money, Austin Hooper's the highest paid tight end ever.
I get that, but Njoku is there. Stefanski is turning this into a run-heavy team. And not to mention, you also have Kareem Hunt, you have Jarvis Landry, and you have Odell Beckham Jr. So it's not only the targets that are an issue, it's the targets where he would be getting them, where Kareem Hunt is, where Jarvis Landry is, and you have David Njoku, who has shown to be, and I mean, his second year, he was, I mean, kind of having a pretty good year, like on his way to stardom until he got injured in year 3. So I don't want to take the chance there where it's Mike Gesicki, and we can talk about the Dolphins being behind. I mean, they did get better on defense, but they're still going to be playing from behind. They're still going to be throwing the ball a lot. We saw what Mike Gesicki did last year as a year 2 tight end. What can he do in year 3, especially because, and this will be kind of contradictory for me because I love Preston Williams, but he's coming off of an ACL tear.
Mm-hmm. So cheap, though.
I know. No, I agree. I mean, I'm trying to buy because if you can get him as your 5th wide receiver, and let's say the second half of the season, he just explodes like he was prepared to do in year 1, then I'm taking him. But so maybe that first half, he's the pass catcher 2 on this team. So and they're going to have to throw deep and often. I mean, and that's what Fitzpatrick does. So I think it's Gesicki because he showed that where he was going last year, and the target, the target distribution isn't even close to as much as Cleveland would be.
Well, yeah, but like you were just saying, especially with Cleveland, I mean, you've got Jarvis, you've got Kareem. I mean, even Chubb to a certain degree, but that's 3 pass catchers right there that with their route trees, they would all overlap into that interior to middle of the field where Hooper would be running some of his routes. With Gesicki, he doesn't have Preston Williams plays outside. I mean, at best, Gesicki is going to be battling with Albert Wilson out of the slot in order.
Oh,
to take
don't you dare use that kind of tone when you mention Albert
I'm just
Wilson.
I'm just saying.
Dare.
I'm just saying.
Wait, isn't Jakeem Grant still
the oft injured Albert Wilson? That's not to disparage his talent. I'm just saying I'm disparaging his availability.
Right.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm a lover of Albert Wilson. I do love that man's game, but I just wish he was on the field more because I mean it was him. I mean Alan Hearns. I mean it was just they haven't been able to actually field three healthy wide receivers at the same time. So it's just Gesicki has been living off of. I mean, in a sense, he's been living off of borrowed time because a lot of that has been given to him the fact that they haven't been able to keep enough wide receivers healthy to put them out on the field.
What? So, but I guess
even
the other
count the first year for Gesicki.
Yeah. So I guess for me though, like the case for Gesicki is in those wide receivers that haven't been out there because, like you said, Albert Wilson has been oft injured with that hip. He might be healthy this year, but he's just injured a lot. Preston Williams is coming off of his ACL. Jakeem Grant had a pretty nasty injury 2 years ago as well. And then Devontae Parker, I think it's funny that we all of a sudden trust Devontae Parker after 4 years of horribleness, 1 year of decent like breakout. But
I mean, he did dog walk Stephon Gilmore up and down that field.
Listen,
he did.
And this is coming from a former Devontae Parker lover. I'm just saying, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Like the man, sure, showed up 1 out of 5 seasons. Sure, it was without Adam Gase, and 3 players broke out outside of him when they got out from under Adam Gase. I get the correlation, but even if Devontae Parker is still it does actually put up numbers, there isn't much competition there. So for me, and not to mention that Mike Gesicki presents a matchup nightmare because he's so athletic and so quick, and he can basically beat out anybody that's covering him. Sans like outside cornerbacks, but even then he can just throw them down and be wide open. He could just Gronky in them. So for me, it's target share, it's athleticism. And it's just overall situation in their given offenses.
I don't necessarily think there's a case at tight end for Mike Gesicki. There isn't a case at tight end for Mike Gesicki. There is a case at wide receiver for Mike Gesicki because that's what he is. He's exactly the same thing that you'd expect from the elite level move tight ends in the league. He has that sort of athleticism, and he's essentially a wide receiver on the field. They've even come out and said that he's going to play as the team's slot wide receiver. He at least is going to be the first choice in that position. So whether or not he's even battling with Albert Wilson or Jakeem Grant in that role, the coaching staff has already come out and said that role is his, and what he does with it is up to him. So if you're looking for volume at tight end, which is, again, what I think you should always be looking for at any position, regardless of what you feel about the talent of him, which is definitely there, you can already see, okay, well, at least there is going to be a clear role that I have here locked up with owning Mike Gesicki for this year.
Just for the record, I was also going to say Mike Gesicki. I just thought that Stompy's enthusiasm for it was a little ill-warranted since Austin Hooper did just get paid the highest contract ever.
I understand that. I think it has a lot to do with his blocking ability along with his receiving ability.
Yes,
I agree with that.
I just wanted to argue with you because
I'm
pretty emphatic. I just when Hooper signed, it just didn't make sense in my head. But I think
he does more than just receive.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying though. It's like it seems like he would take on kind of a Kyle Rudolph role where he's not the pass catcher necessarily. He's much more of a blocker, maybe a red zone guy, and you would see like Irv Smith, David Njoku being that. That Joker type of tight end in this offense.
I feel like the Browns are probably one of the hardest teams in the NFL to kind of figure out on the offensive side of things because of the amount of overlapping talent they have on that football field. They have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Make of what you will with that. I mean, at least Kareem Hunt's going to get most of the receiving work in that tandem. And then you have, like everyone was saying, Jarvis Landry along with those 2 tight ends. So what does that mean? Are you going to run 3 wide receiver sets most of the time. Okay, well then you're leaving one of Njoku or Austin Hooper out. Are you going to run 21 personnel all the time? Okay, well then you might be not necessarily featuring OBJ or Jarvis Landry in the way that you might have imagined. So there's so many different ways that offense can go that I think it's just going to be very difficult to pinpoint week to week kind of what to expect coming out of Cleveland, just because of the sheer amount of talent they have compiled at the skill positions on that team.
But to be honest with you, I don't know that David Njoku has actually earned any more snaps. He hasn't done too terribly much with the targets that he's received. Actually, he's got a pretty bad catch rate. It's actually miserable as a rookie, 53.3%. I forget how many drops he had, but it was way too many. And then he also struggled with drops in 18, got hurt in 19. So I don't know that he's actually even warranted much consideration. But the problem is there's not enough to go around, especially when you take Kareem Hunt. And if you really look at it, like what have we really even seen to say that Nick Chubb is better than Kareem Hunt? Period at running back, but as a receiver,
son, what are you doing?
But as a receiver,
this is going to turn into a 3-hour podcast.
All right, well, let me get to Mike Gesicki at least.
Right.
But
if you want to fight me today,
but if you pivot over to the Dolphins offense, I mean, year one with Adam Gase, his use of 12 personnel with Mike Gesicki is just criminal. That was just that alone deserved firing. The usage of 12 personnel with Mike Gesicki. Why was he on the field in 12 personnel? As you said, Ethan, he is a wide receiver. He's a wide receiver. He's not a tight end. So his hand in the dirt is a detriment to your offense. So all this to say, I picked Mike Gesicki as a wide receiver. His hand's not in the dirt. And a perfect example is Evan Ingram. That's exactly what we want from him. Now we're free to argue all you want, Sam, about the difference between Nick Chubb and Kareem.
That will not end up going at all well for the podcast, so I'm just going to not.
I'll just say that with the Browns, I think we've talked about all the talent that we've got at the pass catcher position, whether it's OBJ, whether it's Jarvis, whether it's Njoku, whether it's Hooper, whether it's Hunt, Chubb. I mean, even there was a report a couple weeks ago I saw about like Rashard Higgins now becoming like that third wide receiver that might emerge like out of that. I mean, but
yeah, he should be 3.
Yeah,
and Peoples-Jones just got drafted, but whatever, probably returned. Something.
But all this talent, I mean, that it intersects at Baker Mayfield, a guy that we saw just have, I mean, a roller coaster like second season where I'm not even sure, even from a mechanical perspective, if he's able to float like most of these guys and keep them at the level of production that we want them to be. And that's my main concern about all of this. I mean, you can take away, or we can even set aside like how much of a run first offense this is going to be like under Stefanski. We can set aside any of the offensive line problems. I mean, really, like what we saw out of Baker Mayfield for quite a bit of 2019, it's concerning enough to me to say that I'll just take the guys that I know have good talent. So OBJ, Jarvis Landry. I mean, Austin Hooper, if we want to dig into that, Hunt Chubb or whatever, we can argue that as well. But it's just for me, I do have some concerns about that offense as a whole, because I mean, which Baker are we going to see? The Baker from 2018 or the Baker from 2019? And to be quite honest with you guys, I don't know.
Even if that offense is rolling, even if we're getting 40-point games out of this offense every single week, if they suddenly morph into the Kansas City Chiefs, who's getting those points? I feel like this is going to be extremely frustrating for fantasy owners this year, because it's going to be a different guy every single game because there's so many different guys on that offense. And again, that's assuming everything what Chris said, that Baker goes back to first-year Baker.
Yeah.
That's assuming a lot. So, I mean, in terms of looking at a thing from a risk-averse perspective, heavily investing in Cleveland Browns for me just seems like probably a bad deal for you.
That sounds like heartache.
I think Freddie Kitchens was a lot of the problem there, though. I'm not saying he wasn't a fine coach, but he certainly shouldn't have been calling any plays. And I'm excited to see a full year of the Cleveland offense without Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that's what they go back to, like short drops, and he's actually able to do quick reads and get the ball out quicker. and and not have to try and run whatever like Kitchens was trying to install this past season, because it just seemed like it completely set Baker back from a mechanical standpoint, to the point where he was throwing, not resetting his feet, throwing from imbalanced platforms. I mean, there's just a lot of his mechanics that we thought, as when he was coming out from Oklahoma, we just thought like he's got it. Like he has a lot of things that he needs to tweak, some minor fixes, but it just seems like all that fell apart like in 2019, and that was hard to see.
All right, so let's move on to some conflicting narratives here. A lot of word coming out of Jacksonville. A lot of people don't expect that team to be very good, but they expect Gardner Minshew to be very good. They expect DJ Chark to be very good. They have differing opinions on Leonard Fournette. Some people, I'm in the camp of thinking that Leonard Fournette is just going to get ran to the ground. There are some people in the camp of thinking that, with the addition of Chris Thompson, that Leonard Fournette is going to be neutered from what we saw last year, that his touchdown production is not going to be able to make up for that lack of involvement in the receiving game. But there's a lot of noise surrounding this team as a whole. So let's kind of break down some of the barriers here. Who are you truly believing in Jacksonville, and why? And I mean, is this a team that maybe you should be targeting as that offense that maybe could go off that people aren't really thinking of? Or is this a team where there's a lot of question marks, there's a lot of smoke, and there's probably fire that you want to avoid?
They're going to be throwing a lot. That defense is atrocious. So I buy into DJ Chark. I mean, he put up numbers with Gardner Minshew last year. Gardner Minshew into his second season. I'm good with DJ Chark. I'm actually fine with Leonard Fournette as well. He's due for a positive regression in touchdowns. What did he have? 2 last year total? 0 rushing or something like that, or 2 rushing. Anyway, point is he didn't score with how many touches he had. So I have to believe that they are going to be using him in the pass game. I mean, I understand Chris Thompson is there, but Chris Thompson also has an issue with staying healthy. So while he may not get 100 targets this year, I would still expect something like 50 from him. I like Laviska Shenault, but I'm afraid he's not going to do much his rookie season. So really the two that I'm taking are Chark and Fournette here, because I'm with you. I think they run him into the ground because it's his last season of his rookie deal.
Yeah, I really wish that I could invest in Leonard Fournette in Dynasty. It has nothing to do with his production, but everything to do with I just am sick of dealing with messy running back contracts, and inevitably that's what we're going to have to deal with him. But he is getting so criminally disrespected. Look at what I discussed earlier with Aaron Jones. We can't look at his 19 touchdowns and expect that to happen again. And we need to know what happens if he doesn't get those 19 touchdowns. Look at Leonard Fournette last year. That's what happens when you get 3 touchdowns and not 19. But here's the thing. Leonard Fournette's on the other end of that spectrum. He cannot get 1,152 rushing yards and only 3 touchdowns again next year. It's just not going to happen. And if you played DFS, you lost all your hair just like I did, because there is no way that he should have been not scoring in some of those situations. So add touchdowns to his projections, please, because he's going to get all the work. He had 265 rushing attempts last year, a pretty healthy season, only missed 1 game. That was the narrative, right? He only played 8 games the year before. First year he played 13, played 15 last year. All the production in the world you're going to get out of Leonard Fournette this year, and he is so cheap. Maybe you do buy him for a championship run at this point in Dynasty and hope he lands on that team like we discussed earlier. Eitan, you're completely correct. There are going to be a lot of teams next year that are going to be looking for these Aaron Joneses and these Leonard Fournettes. Sure. You just have to hope he lands on them. And as cheap as he is right now, he's much cheaper than Aaron Jones, I think. So sure, take the shot on Leonard Fournette and hope he lands somewhere, but you're going to get a nice championship run out of Leonard Fournette. In terms of DJ Chark, I think I'm buying this whole offense currently just because DJ Chark is at the very bottom of a wide receiver tier that I want everybody else to make the decisions on. When I have Allen Robinson at the top and I've got like 15 guys between him and DJ Chark, I'm trading back in every startup, every single one. If I have a pick around where Allen Robinson should go, I'm trading back to DJ Chark, period. So this offense, just because that defense is going to be so bad, we're going to see a lot of volume. Not positive we're going to see about Gardner Minshew. He's going to be the Achilles heel here, or he's going to be the savior. That's really tough, but I really do like buying DJ Chark and Leonard Fournette, frankly, for as cheap as he's gotten.
What about you, Chris? Is Gardner Minshew the triple threat, dual threats, the Konami code QB that people say that he is?
I believe. I mean, I think it's hard to buy in before, you know, the hype train kind of passes you by. But I think we saw enough out of Gardner Minshew in his starts this past season that I think there's enough for you to be at least. I came away looking at his tape impressed. I mean, for as much as folks that come from like air raid offenses like wind up getting they get downgraded in a sense because people look at their production as being inflated because you're passing so much. You're part of the, you know, a team or part of a system that wants to pass so much. It's just you accumulate all these stats just because of that. Well, I think, but still there's enough of Minshew's game that I think lent itself to what the situations he was put into in Jacksonville. So that I do think that, I mean, he was able to adapt fairly quickly to the situation once Foles went down. And I thought he actually put together some pretty decent games. And yeah, I mean, I think what was it? Some folks were calling it the stash dash, like whenever he would scramble for like quick first down, like pick up like 5-10 yards. And I think his athleticism, I mean, for as limited as it may be, it's enough. It's enough to get the job done. So I think for the situation that the Jaguars found themselves in, I mean, you couldn't ask for much more. I mean, out of your, you know, for what they drafted him for, can't really ask for much more out of a backup, to be quite honest. And as when it comes to DJ Chark or Leonard Fournette, look at how the team has valued them. I mean, look at what they've done in terms of adding running backs like to that backfield, whether it's be through the draft or picking up guys like Chris Thompson. I mean, regardless of what you think about Chris Thompson with him being older and like oft injured as well, I mean, they've added like a number of running backs over the past couple of seasons. But look at how many wide receivers that they've added to their wide receiving core at this point. I mean, have they really added a wide receiver one or an alpha or X receiver type to that offense in order to replace a guy like DJ Chark? No. They went out and got Laviska Shenault, I mean, who profiles as one of those like hybrid type wide receivers that can play either inside or outside. I mean, he could be one of those guys that can take the ball out of the backfield. I mean, that type of player. I mean, there's nobody. I mean, if they had wound up drafting somebody like, let's say, Michael Pittman, if they had gone out and gotten a Denzel Mims, if they had gone out and gotten T. Higgins or any one of those guys, I mean, sure, then we might be having that conversation about like, where's DJ Chark's value at right now? But even in that offense, when he was able to maintain a 20-21% target share within that offense, and that was with Gardner Minshew, I mean, just being thrust into that situation, yeah, give me DJ Chark. I mean, I think that he showed enough like within that offense to, I mean, given the fact that they were thrust into that position and he still balled out. I mean, yeah, I think that he's somebody that we should and we could and should be investing in just based off of that production. Now they got the offseason to even, I guess, to continue building on that relationship. Yeah, I think that's something we should invest in. I mean, that's what you would want to see. A young quarterback, young wide receiver, and the ability for them to stay together and continue that rapport that they've already put in place in their first season. So why wouldn't you try and buy into that instead of, I guess, maybe knocking it for whatever reason? It might be it's a one-off, or they only did it because Minshew was put into that starting position. Well, if that's the case, then fine. But as of right now, Minshew's the starting quarterback and DJ Chark is their starting wide receiver one. So why not buy into that situation, especially considering, as Sam rightly pointed out, that defense is bad. I mean, they don't have Jalen Ramsey anymore. They don't have AJ Boye anymore. Nope. Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, I have no idea. Like, he's not tweeting anymore, but I don't think he's going to be with the team all that much longer anyway.
Calais Campbell's gone. Tevin Smith retired last year.
Yeah, he's gone. I mean, there's so many pieces on the defense.
Here's my issue with that, though. So if we expect this defense to be as bad as we expect this defense to be, I don't think we're expecting, again, the Kansas City Chiefs from this Jaguars offense, regardless of how optimistic we are for guys like DJ Chark and for Gardner Minshew. With the lack of draft capital invested in Gardner Minshew, does he find himself in a situation where he's literally in charge of what happens with his NFL future in Jacksonville. If he plays great this year, then he keeps the job. If he doesn't play great this year, then this team might just be bad enough to go ahead and get a high enough pick to easily replace him. Do you think that there's a danger to maybe over-investing in Minshew for that reason, or are you kind of beyond that at this point based on what you saw from last year?
No, that's brilliant for Gardner Minshew this year. This is going to be incredible to watch because if he lets the team get into the range of Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence, he lost his job. And if he keeps his team out of the range of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, a few other guys that I'm blanking on, he keeps his job. And that is just very cool to see this player who's already a guy that we like to watch, in my opinion. I love to watch him. I think he's a really cool guy. Already a cool guy to watch. That's just an extra narrative that we get to follow. And like, if you can succeed this year, which I think you should be able to, because I like Laviska Shenault. I think DJ Chark is a fantastic receiver. You have Leonard Fournette. Raquel Armstead's fine if Leonard Fournette gets hurt, which he tends to do. And Chris Thompson to take some of those. I didn't mention the pass catching for Leonard Fournette because he had, 28 receptions in year one, he had 76 receptions last year, 22 the year before, and 36 the year before. So that's just an outlier. That's not going to happen again. Hopefully the touchdowns go up, receptions will go down. But he's got these guys in place where he can succeed. And it's honestly solely up to him if he loses his job the next year. And that doesn't happen a lot in the NFL.
All right, so that is going to be our 5-point for today. We're going to go ahead and go into our Dynasty Diagnostic. We're going to plug in the analyzer and get to this week's Dynasty Diagnostic. And our episode 76, I think, roster was submitted by Tom Carlin. You can find him on Twitter at TomCar39. Be sure to give him a follow. And if you want to be part of next week's show, follow the podcast, smash that subscribe button, leave us a review on iTunes, and let us know you did. We really, really appreciate that. Helps the pod grow, helps us build the technician community. But let's get into what everyone is actually tuning in for. It's a 12-team point per reception, 0.4 pass TD, or is it four point pass? I'm reading this incorrectly. I don't know. I'm just not in my head.
It's 4 points. It's 4-point pass, Aton.
4-point pass.
Think about it. 4-point passing touchdown.
24-man rosters. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, a tight end, 2 flex spots, a super flex spot as well. And at quarterback, we have Pat Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Cam Newton, Drew Lock, Andrew Luck, and Will Grier. I mean, it's a super flex roster. So for me already, we don't need Mahomes and Kyler and Lock right now. I would be trying to trade one of Kyler and Lock right now just because you're going to get outsized returns from that. What do you guys think about what you would do if you were in charge of this particular QB room?
Stay. Trade 101.
Yeah.
I guess I might put my big boy pants on and trade Mahomes. I mean, people swear that he's untouchable, but if you go out there and you look, people will destroy their rosters to see Patrick Mahomes.
I mean, I agree, but it depends, I guess, what you get back. Like
Absolutely.
you need, like, I'm trying to think. Wentz and an early first in 2020 at the very least, probably more.
Yeah, more.
Let's move a little bit forward on this team at RB, at wide receiver, and at tight end. There's holes everywhere. There's definitely something that can be done there. I mean, in this particular case, looking at this team specifically, does that change the equation for you?
I think so, because you'll get more for Mahomes than you would anything, and you can use you have 2 startable QBs with Kyler and I say startable, but Kyler and Drew Lock, who I think are both poised for second-year breakouts. And then with 101, you could end up getting. I would do Tua because I'm biased towards Tua, but you can get one of Tua or Joe Burrow and be good to go. And then with Mahomes, you can help fill in running backs, wide receivers, because like Adam said, they are like people are dismantling their teams trying to buy Mahomes. And with these RBs, basically you have Dalvin Cook and nothing. I mean, Darrell Henderson, maybe something, but I'm not banking on it. You have Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, and Crowder. McCole Hardman's there too, so that's great. But you need 2 running backs probably, and at least 2 wide receivers. Jesus, I don't.
Well, you're putting Mahomes on the block. You're putting Mahomes on the block.
Now that I'm sitting here looking at this, I'm rebuilding.
Well, that's the best time to get rid of your Mahomes and your Lamar Jacksons and your CMCs and things like that, because teams will dismantle your roster. But one thing that you have the luxury with on this roster is with Mahomes that many people who sell Mahomes don't have, is that you do not need a quarterback in return. For one, you're taking a quarterback at 101, period. I think some people are taking JT and CH. I think that's a mistake. You're taking a quarterback at 101. Not to mention, you also have Cam, and we're definitely not done seeing Cam in his career, and you don't need him right now. So you have the luxury of getting a huge haul for Patrick Mahomes, and you don't have to cut the value that you're getting back in half because you have to get that QB first, right? And they're so valuable. So you only get, $25 worth of QB, and then the rest is sprinkled another $25 on every other which player, right? You get this huge package for Patrick Mahomes, and you don't even need a quarterback back. So I think that's a good way to turn this roster around quick, is get rid of Patrick.
So here's the other side of that coin, though, is so if they don't trade Mahomes, they have 3 quarterbacks, and you have those other holes that you can fill with 101. So if I could somehow trade 101, move back to 103, let's say, you can get one of CEH or Jonathan Taylor. You fill a hole at RB. You can probably get, I don't know, a second, maybe even a back end first. Let's say if a team has 2 firsts, so you can then fill in a hole at the running back, and then you could fill a hole at wide receiver. Now you aren't going to be banking on that rookie wide receiver this year. But with Dalvin Cook, and let's just say Jonathan Taylor is the RB2, and then you have Mike Evans and Brandon Cooks. With those QBs, you have you're riding on a thin line in terms of injuries, but you have a team that you can put together and win if they stay healthy. It's what you want to do here. Take that risk or start the rebuild. If you're trading Mahomes, I think you have to start the rebuild. So if you trade Mahomes, get rid of Dalvin Cook, get rid of Mike Evans, get rid of Brandon Cooks, and rebuild. But if you trade 101, you could actually compete this year. I'm on the rebuild side because depth is key in fantasy football for me. And I just hate trying to ride into a season with the minimum number of running backs I need, the minimum wide receivers I need. So I say you rebuild here. But
middle of the road is the worst place in the world.
Right.
Yeah, and that's where I see that roster right there, because I mean one injury, one bad start, and you're basically you're done for the season at that point. That's where I see that roster. And to you guys' point, you could probably move Mahomes, Evans, like Cook, possibly like Cook. Well, Brandon Cooks I see as somebody that's more of an in-season like type trade.
Exactly, I was going to bring that up.
I see them as more of a move, because especially after his move to Houston, we don't know how he's going to be integrated in that offense, the concussion concerns and all that. I see him as more of you get into week 5, week 6, week 7, you see he's doing all right, and then you move him. Very similar to that of, Julian Edelman. What's that offense going to look like? Is it Stidham season? How well is he going to be integrated in that offense? That's another guy that you try and move like within season. Also, like, even if you want to move those tight ends, if you're rebuilding, get rid of OJ Howard. If you want to hang on to the younger guys like Herndon, Knox, Jarwin, okay, fine. But you can jettison Howard just off the hype that he's going to be playing with TB if you want. I mean, but there's a lot of guys that you can move now. Like if obviously this is before their rookie draft, and then once they get into the season, continue that rebuild and build some picks. Either get some younger pieces now that you can stash, or build some more picks for 21 by moving some of those candidates for in-season moves.
This is actually a very timely roster considering he has both Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison
Right.
on this roster. We've been talking about a rebuild just for some perspective for people that are listening. At running back, it's Dalvin Cook, Devonta Freeman, Royce Freeman, Darrell Henderson, Alexander Madison, and Bryce Love. At wide receiver, the full roster is Mike Evans, Julian Edelman, Brandon Cooks, Jamison Crowder, Mecole Hardman, Russell Gage, Jalen Hurd, Andy Isabella. At tight end, it's O.J. Howard, Dawson Knox, Blake Jarwin, and Chris Herndon. So you can kind of see what we were saying about, I mean, if you squint hard enough, then yeah, you can definitely see maybe this team challenging for a playoff spot, but a lot of things have to go right. And
it's tough.
What Adam was saying about, the middle being the worst possible spot that you could be in any sport, in any dynasty league, that's very relevant to this roster. And I think that's kind of where you are right now. So what are you doing with Dalvin Cook? Because I mean, you probably would have said, okay, a few days ago, yeah, go ahead and sell him and see as many assets as you can get back and rebuild that way. But now with a very stark, depressed price for him right now based on the news that is happening, are you going to wait? And if you wait with this team, is this team flexible enough to give you the leeway to wait? Or is this a team that you kind of have to act on now and get your moves in before the season, because if things don't go right, then you're stuck holding the bag?
Nobody has a holdout trade that they're proud of. I just want to put that out there. Like you sell during a holdout, you panic. You're not going to be proud of your return at the end of the day. So I don't think anybody's going to be happy with the trade that they receive right now for Dalvin Cook. You see people all over Twitter talking about the crazy trades that they're getting offered for Dalvin Cook right now, especially in a season where we don't even know technically when we're starting, things of that nature. Yeah. And if you're going to lose anyways, we do want this roster to lose, in my opinion. If you're going to lose anyways, I mean, I'm not selling Dalvin Cook during a holdout. No way. Let him come back. He will pop off. We already talked about it earlier. That offense is going to utilize him heavily. Then absolutely trade him in a rebuild. I don't want any running back ever going into their second contract, especially on a rebuild.
Yeah, you're going to have to hold on to Dalvin Cook. I don't think he ultimately holds out. I think he will play. So you just can't sell him right now. So with that, you probably want to hold on to him until maybe after the season starts and he puts in 3 or 4 games, and then you're like, okay, I'm not going to really win with this team, so I'll trade him for a 2021 first and another young running back that maybe is struggling. Maybe Cam Akers is struggling in the first quarter of the season, or J.K. Dobbins because he's behind Mark Ingram. Then you look to trade Dalvin Cook for one of those guys plus, or a young wide receiver plus.
So are you ignoring the fear that maybe this might turn into a Le'Veon Bell situation where, yeah, he comes back, but he comes back in drastically different circumstances, and now you're looking at an asset that has depreciated, I mean, half its value in just that short amount of time? Do you think
well, but I mean, wouldn't you say that your situation now at that where they're like Adam mentioned, the trades that you're seeing for Dalvin Cook, you're just you're still trading at a devalued price. So what is the difference between trading now where you're going to you might get another piece, but what does that actually mean for your team, or later where you're like, oh, I got to sell him for a second rounder now? Because I just don't think that trading him now versus later is going to net you anything that's going to be worthwhile.
This is more of like a theoretical thing, like kind of with the whole Tyreek Hill situation last year and people not necessarily knowing whether or not he was going to come back. I mean, do you as a dynasty owner choose to operate in uncertainty and try to maximize value because of that uncertainty? Or are you more focused on kind of playing it as safe as possible and ensuring that at least you and your trading partner kind of knows exactly who's getting what in the deal.
I have an analogy that I live by with the running back position that I want to kind of bring into this conversation. Like prior to the NFL draft, I just don't buy running backs, period. And there's value to be had if you do buy Darrell Henderson and he doesn't lose the job to Cam Akers, right? But by not buying Darrell Henderson and then they do draft Cam Akers, you gained value because you did not make that trade for Darrell Henderson. When you bought cheap on the unknown, you could have gained plenty of value, right? If they didn't draft Cam Akers or anybody of value, Darrell Henderson, workhorse, fantastic. But you could still trade for Darrell Henderson later in that event. I mean, he hasn't proved anything. So the point here is pertinent to free agency as well, but on the opposite end. So may I get that extra piece that Sam mentioned by trading right now? Sure. But if we're talking, I associate everything with dollars in fantasy football. If we're talking about getting $30 worth value right now or $25 later after taking the chance that maybe I could get my $100 that he's actually worth, well, I'd rather pay that $5 to take the chance to get $100 than, take that money right now. So like Sam was saying, I think that the situation is worth just monitoring more because you're not going to get enough right now to make it worth it to say, man, I really wish I made that trade during the holdout.
Yeah, it's just kind of one of those interesting situations where, deciding when to make the moves are as important as making the moves themselves. But let's now just go into wide receivers and tight ends really quickly. Mike Evans, Julian Edelman, Brandon Cooks, Jamison Crowder, Nicole Hardman, Russell Gage, Jalen Hurd, Andy Isabella. Mike Evans, say what you want about Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans is still in line for 1,000 yards, anywhere between 5 to 8 touchdowns. Maybe he doesn't necessarily get to the dizzying heights that he has been at for the last season or so, but I do think that he's still within a top 12 to 15 wide receiver. Brandon Cooks, anything can happen with him. He can definitely pop and be in that top 15 area. He can also completely disappear off the face of the earth if they decide that Will Fuller is going to be the focal deep threat on that offense and they're going to use Brandon Cooks in a different way. So with this wide receiver core, what are you doing? Are you looking for guys that are going to be at least guaranteed volume hogs, guys that are going to play Julian Edelman roles like Tyler Boyd or like Jarvis Landry potentially, a guy that's going to catch a lot of passes and just provide some level of floor? Or are you just scrapping it? And now while you have the time to be a little bit more risky with your roster because you're expecting to lose anyway, just shoot for the ceiling as much as possible and go after guys like Marquise Brown and so on and so forth. What is your way to rebuild this wide receiver core into something you think can compete sooner rather than later?
It's funny. If you really squint, you can see these wide receivers being a decent group for fantasy. Mike Evans and Brandon Cooks are the wide receiver ones on their respective teams, outside wide receivers. Julian Edelman still the wide receiver one on his team. And don't give me anything about N'Keal Harry when we haven't seen anything from him. And then Jamison Crowder. He'll give you a 14 reception, 99-yard day and still be extremely useful. It's horrendous in terms of yards per catch, but that doesn't matter in PPR. And then Mecole is kind of that ceiling guy. He had 6-8 touchdowns last year and minimal targets. So you could see it working out. I don't think it will because Julian Edelman's older. Brandon Cooks has that injury history. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in New York with the Jets? Mecole, Sammy's still there, so you're not getting the ceiling because he's just not going to get targets unless somebody gets injured. So for me, it's sell Mike Evans, sell Julian Edelman, sell Brandon Cooks, sell Jamison Crowder, get back young wide receivers, maybe get back like if you can, get back somebody like a T. Higgins or Brian Edwards or Michael Pittman, get picks back, get those young wide receivers, get Preston Williams, get Paris Campbell, take shots here because you can gain those second year wide receivers that have their values dropped tremendously. On top of that, you can get future picks, and you've already started your rebuild, especially if one of those young wide receivers breaks out.
What's the one tight end that you think that you add to this team that at least gives you the flexibility to focus on different positions going into the future that's acquirable right now?
Tight end?
Tight end.
I mean, Gesicki's one that's acquirable. Ian Thomas is one that's acquirable. I would look at like somebody like Tyler Higbee, because people are, for some reason, you're seeing Gerald Everett mentioned more in fantasy football right now because of the Todd Gurley, or because of the Brandon Cooks trade. But Tyler Higbee's the one with the contract. Tyler Higbee's the one that went full on like elite at the end of the last season. He is the pass catcher, or the better pass catching back in LA. So that's another one. And he's relatively young too. He was only was picked 1 year ahead of Gerald Everett. Mm-hmm. So that's another one where I think he's getting slept on and has potential to be a top 5. I mean, if he produces at the rate he did, has the potential to be a top 5 tight end next year.
Right. I think out of all those guys,
sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was gonna say, just looking at that wide receiver squad, I mean, that's a damn good redraft squad. Not gonna lie, if I didn't have to consider any years like past 2020, I mean, that's a solid redraft group. But I mean, just look at that. So Julian Edelman, 34 years old, his contract is up after the season. Brandon Cooks, his contract, $8 million for this year, and then his dead cap drops to 0 after this season. Jamison Crowder, contract up after this season. So like you've got, I mean, 3 out of your 4 top end wide end, 3 out of your 4 top wide receivers, all are going to be in contract woes, or we're going to have some concern or uncertainty regarding their contracts after this upcoming season. So a lot of those guys, I mean, like I'd mentioned beforehand, I mean, they are easy candidates for once the season starts rolling, you find that contender, and that they wind up being those guys that you wind up moving for future picks. Some of those guys, that the assets that Sam mentioned, the Marquise Browns of the world, that have that youth on their side, along with being attached to good offenses, those would be the guys I'd be targeting.
Herndon and Knox are the two that I was going to say. Yeah, I like buying both of those guys right now. Chris Herndon, he got in trouble, right? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he did get in some sort of
I think he got a DUI
for a little. It was a 4 game, I think, or something like that.
I think he got a DUI and he got suspended for the first 4 games.
And he's looked, and then also injured, and he's looked pretty fantastic when he has played. Not much competition for touches there, and then Dawson Knox as well. It's just a title that came on at times last year. Young, someone who I liked in rookie drafts a couple years ago, and can be acquired for next to nothing. So I think you've already made a pretty good stride at taking really cheap guys that could turn into something.
Yeah, I think I'm paying what I need to pay to acquire Evan Ingram right now, because I think if there's any type of building block tight end that you're getting right now that at least has the potential to be that guy for you for a long period of time, I think it's him. Just because, I mean, even if he doesn't necessarily end up a New York Giant for the foreseeable future, I do think that there's talent there just in terms of volume because of the type of player that he is, if he can stay healthy. And I think you can acquire him at a really depressed price right now when you compare it to what he can actually produce at that position. If he's healthy, I don't think there's any doubt that we're putting him on the same pedestal that we're putting Mark Andrews on right now. And that's
fair.
Pretty much tight end 3, just behind the big 2 of Travis Kelce and George Kittle. So for me, I think right now on this team, again, with the risk already embedded in all of the other positions that you have to fill anyway, and the fact that you're not looking at being super competitive this year anyway, I take that dive. I take that gamble, and I do what AP was saying earlier, which was – spend the $5 for the chance to win 100 and just kind of roll it and see what happens. But that is going to round out this roster. So I'm going to ask the DOM to do this together. I want you guys to put your heads together and come up with what type of vehicle that this roster is to you. Are we dealing with a coupe? Are we dealing with a Cadillac with spinning rims? Are we dealing with your mom's Mazda that probably should have been decommissioned like 15 years ago, but hasn't been? What are we looking at with this roster?
I think it's the Saturn that I paid $500 for, drove it twice, paid $700 for, broke again. I probably shouldn't have paid all that money, and you shouldn't be starting these players. Trade them and lose you some games. I should have scrapped that car. I scrapped it for $200.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm thinking this is like, actually, I have one sitting on my driveway right now. It's like an old Ford Ranger, like an old beat up truck that's just like, it'll get the job done, right? I mean, looking at this roster, you've got enough pieces to possibly get the job done. You could probably eke out about maybe 5 or 6 wins with this roster. But that one pothole, that one bad pothole that you hit, I mean, then all of a sudden, the back fender falls off, the tailgate falls off. You start seeing transmission fluid like in your driveway, and then you're just basically you can't even get it out of your driveway after that. Like, I just feel like just one injury, one injury happens to anybody on that squad, and one holdout already, and it's a nightmare, and that's not what you want. So that's what I would liken this.
It's not even that it's terrible. It's just that it should be terrible is what we're getting at.
Yeah.
Yes, the roster's okay, but why do you want that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want to minimize your stress when you're playing fantasy football, and this isn't the roster to do it. Like, I think that's what everybody's trying to say. There is a conceivable way that you can get to the promised land with this team, but you're not going to have any hair after it's all said and done.
Nope.
I have two cars here. So it either reminds me of like a early 2000s, maybe late 90s, like Honda Civic with a spoiler on the back and a can for a muffler. And it's got like rust spots, but it has like a huge like speaker system that rattles everything in the car, has a nice stereo system, and then like has racing wheels with like nice rims. Like, it's just a pile of garbage car, but all of the accessories along with it are beautiful. That's your quarterbacks. Everything else, your quarterbacks, maybe Dalvin Cook, maybe Mike Evans. Everything else is terrible. It's terrible, and those things don't belong on that car. But you're in high school and you're an idiot. Or I had my first car was a '79 Lincoln Continental. Gorgeous car, would glide when it ran. When keywords here, when it ran, would get vapor lock all the time in the gas pump and stuff like that. Just a money pit, and that's what it was. Such a beautiful car, but it wouldn't run for anything except for like in spurts. And so that's what this team is. You might win a few games when you get Mike Evans, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler, Dalvin Cook all lining up at once. But other than that, it's just going to be just a pile of garbage for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
This is a repurposed Crown Victoria. That's what this is. This is a car that used to be bad back in the day, that used to kind of be something feared, but has been decommissioned and now is a civilian car, and now doesn't quite really do anything for this team. This car is one of those that has, again, everything that you would imagine in terms of accessories available to it, but doesn't really have the staying power to get you to where you need to go at this point. It's space. It's empty space at this point. And I think that's what you have here. But it's the counterpoint to that. I think it's a blank canvas. I think your huge investment that you've made in quarterbacks clearly has at least given you the opportunity to be as crazy as you want to be with this roster. You can take this any way you want to go. Even if you want to rebuild this year, you can trade Mahomes, keep the 101, go ahead, make that QB pick, and build this year if that is a path that you want to go down. We're just talking about, path A versus path B. Which one is going to be the easier route to the championship? That said, I mean, aside from the hood ornament, there's nothing else there. It's already done its job and it's past its prime at this point. So I do think that it is a sell opportunity. Chris, Adam, thank you so much for joining us, man. Before we go ahead and get off this podcast, I want to give you guys a chance to talk about anything that you guys are doing at DLF with DOM. Tell me what you guys got going on and tell our listeners where to find you guys.
What are we doing, Adam?
Well, you can find us over at the DLF mailbag. You can reach out to pretty much anyone from DLF, but we're on the DLF YouTube channel. Feel free to go comment on those. Ask me what I'm smoking if you want to. People have taken that liberty. And just ask us any kind of questions you want, similar to what we did today with the roster. We get a lot of roster questions over there. And then Dom, we're just kind of doing our own thing now that we're employed over there at DLF. We can kind of go crazy with Dynasty Owners Manual as not our primary obligation. So we've incorporated things like just banter shows where we just get to kind of talk about Dynasty Fantasy Football. And then we still have guests on, of course, because it is the Owner's Manual. We need people to come in and teach so we continue to learn. Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing us on, man. This was a blast.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, for both of us, yeah, it's been more of focusing on the video content, and we've been working with DLF to kind of get the YouTube channel up. I mean, it's definitely not just us. I mean, it's Reggie, it's Addison, it's Ryan. I mean, the whole video crew like over there. But it's been a blast, like working with those folks and pumping out that content. But if you can't find me over there, I mean, you can definitely find me over at 444, doing all my stuff there, like over the summer.
He's a weatherman. He's a weatherman.
Yes, that was my claim to fame. That's what got me on the scene. But I actually do have a couple of research pieces that'll be coming out on that, kind of building on some of the data that I was able to pick up from there.
From weatherman, because you're only a weatherman to me. I don't know.
I'm only a weatherman.
Yeah.
That's it. So I've got that. I'm doing some best ball work over at 4-4 as well. They've been pushing me into doing some more high stakes stuff. They're sending me to some convention like in Kentucky in August. I don't know, man. Like it's kind of wild. Yeah, I know. But we'll see how that works out. But yeah, I'll be if it's not best ball, if it's not dynasty, if it's any of the weather stuff, you can find all my work over at 444 for the most part. So that's where you can find me.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. We are blessed to get the great guests that we happen to get every single week on the Dynasty Diagnostic. And without your support listening out there, we would not be able to attract some of the greatest names in the community, like Mr. Chris Allen, like Mr. Adam Wilde. Thank you so much for you guys for coming. Also, guys that are listening out there, please make sure to tell your friends about the podcast, spread the love, let everyone know about the Dynasty Diagnostic so we can grow this technician community. And please make sure to go ahead and listen to Sam as he talks about what else we got going on with Patreon and with our store NB show.
So go to patreon.com/Dino Diagnostic. We have several tiers that you can support us with. You get access to a personal chat with a bunch of, not a bunch right now, but some very good minds in football to just share your thoughts. You can get your roster moved to the jump to the front of the line. You can get t-shirts. You can get all sorts of stuff. Patreon.com/Dino Diagnostic. And then at storenvy.com/FF shirts, that is Dynasty Outhouse's fantasy football store. There's shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, stickers, from Trade Addicts Pod, from Dynasty Game Night, from I have to think Dynasty Dummies at this point since they started the DAP network. For us, we have a couple shirts in there and a sticker. Superflex Super Shows in there as well. And 10% of proceeds go to Fantasy Cares. So you're not only helping your favorite podcast, but you are donating to a good cause. Finally, I have a personal project of my own called Listen, a podcast. If you could follow listen_a_pod on Twitter, look for it on iTunes and Podbean, and it will be on Stitcher and I believe Spotify at some point soon. but it's a podcast to give a platform to specifically African Americans at this point but will also spread out to other oppressed minorities to help educate, or to give them a platform to help educate more privileged groups in the U.S. and hopefully help them understand exactly what it is to be a person of color or different sexual orientation in the United States. So maybe we can get rid of all of these racist policies and just the underlying current of racism in the United States.
Sam, please tell me more about this podcast. Would you happen to have guests?
Oh yeah,
on this podcast.
So my first guest is I've talked to Chris 2 days in a row. My first guest was Chris. Shared. I just released it today. Shared. I guess just his experiences being Black in America, but also growing up in an area that isn't considered Black by U.S. standards, and just the struggles that he has dealt with throughout his life with that. So I appreciate you, Chris, for jumping on. I would appreciate you guys checking that out, letting me know how it is, giving me some critiques and whatnot. And hopefully I can grow this thing and I can just be part of the movement.
Mm-hmm. We appreciate you.
All right, guys. As we log off today, everybody please stay safe. Everybody please don't lose your head amongst all of this. There's a lot happening right now. Please just make sure that you and your family are safe during all of this for a number of reasons. Coronavirus, as well as everything that's going on right now. Just make sure that you and yours are doing good. And again, thank you for listening to the podcast. Please, if you haven't already, go ahead and make sure that your league mates, maybe not your league mates, maybe somebody else's league mates, know about the show, and we greatly appreciate that. So thank you for making it to the Dynasty Diagnostic Service Center today. Please be sure to keep up with your scheduled maintenance and catch us next time to ensure quality performance. See you on your next visit.